Well, hey everybody, Wes McDonald here, and welcome to day 7. I got 2 fingers there, right? Day 7 of the
Day
10
7.
live stream challenge. I can't believe it. We were just talking about it before we got into this. It's really incredible to think of all of the content that we've already shared with people, and 3 days left of some incredible content as we move towards the finish line. And of course, with the flat rate journey, we are never finished. But how are you doing today, Ken?
I am doing great. It has been so much fun the last 7 days. 6 days, and we'll have fun today. And we've got some fun days coming up, some things that are going to be just so interesting. I am such a fan of our discussion and such a fan of flat rate. And so talking about it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm super thrilled about today because, one of the challenges that we always run into people are learning how to do flat rate is saying, well, how do I do this with my finance partner, right? And, the honest truth is, I'm just going to say it, there's not a lot of options out there, but the ones that are out there, the folks that we work with are absolutely incredible. And we're very fortunate. So you will meet a couple of our guests in a few minutes who are actually our sponsors today, and they'll, take you through some of the things that they do. And it really was important. We laid the groundwork for, kind of the finance side of things quite a few years ago. And as I said in one of the first episodes, we missed a couple of marks in the sense that the customers were ready, the model was ready, user print volumes were in decline. But many years ago, the one thing that wasn't ready were the dealers, because, quite frankly, the industry was still quite healthy. There were very few dealers that I would speak to that weren't, making more money than they were the year before, right? So it's very hard to shift a model. Welcome to the pandemic, which I don't think created any new pains, but it certainly accelerated a lot of things. Some of these new digital workflows and the way that people work, where they work, those kind of things, right? So the interest of this has been absolutely incredible. It's completely blown my mind how many dealers have, registered for this and continue to register, right? I saw another 5 dealers register this morning. And, so that number continues to build. And before we go any further, we just encourage everyone, if you're watching this on LinkedIn or on YouTube and you're not registered, you're going to want to, because thanks to our sponsors like GreatAmerica, these 10 days for you are free. And when you're registered, you get the repository of all 10 days of the challenge for free. Now, Ken, what happens next week if somebody decides to register?
Next week, the price goes up.
Yes, it does. It goes from 0 to something. And so definitely if you're watching, make sure you do register and get signed up, because we still have 3 days left and you get access to the full library. The other thing, we are live streaming. So, if you have comments or questions, make sure that you do post them in the comment section. For those that are on our website registered, you'll see the comment box there. If you're on Facebook, you'll see the comment box where you are, as well as the other social channels. So let's keep it social. If you have questions or comments, make sure you post them. Make sure you join the conversation, because it's a lot more fun when you do. And maybe I'll, get things started off. We always love to ask, people this. Let me make sure I get up my map. As I talked about, we had new registrations this morning, but man, this thing is global. When you think of, the fact that when we look at flat rate, this is not just something that we're doing in the United States, that it's everywhere now. Obviously in Canada, look at that, Spain, France. Where are we from? Looks like we got somebody who's putting a comment. Jer. Oh, sorry, no Hawaiian shirt today. I know, but I'm glad you brought that up, because there is a story behind the shirt. Gonna put it up there a little bit. Great Lakes, and it's Port Colborne, Ontario. So that's a shirt that my wife actually sells in her retail store. So today is kind of a proud day for the for the Great Lakes. But don't worry, Jer. I promise you, there's going to be at least one more day with a new Hawaiian shirt for you to have a chuckle with. So lots of folks from all over the world, and Jer has been amazing. He's been in for every day of the challenge that I can tell so far. So hopefully it's been useful for you. You look at all these countries, and what it should tell everybody is that we have finally reached a point when the flat rate model isn't going anywhere. And the number of dealers that I speak with that are doing flat rate already, the ones that Ken and I work with, the ones that have learned how to do some kind of version on their own, the OEMs, which we shared a few days ago, right? both Xerox and Konica Minolta now advertising it on their websites, right? Like this is not going away. It's not going anywhere. So we're super thrilled to be able to help people, to get through this. And as we mentioned, we couldn't do it without our sponsors. And what I'm going to do now is bring up a couple of fine people that I've had the opportunity to work with for a lot of years. And first, I'm going to add Tanya Stone. How are you, Tanya?
Hello. I'm great.
And we've also got Kim Loudon. How are you, Kim?
I'm wonderful. Good to see you guys.
Great to see you. And I can't tell you how much I miss you guys. I can't wait until we can actually get together again at an event and be able to see each other. So I think for me, the first event that I'm booked in for is in October at the BTA, North Carolina. So hopefully one or both of you will be there so we can actually get together again. It'll be great. And absolutely. I just want to thank you guys for, stepping up to the plate and sponsoring this 10-day challenge because of you, it is free to the dealer community to be able to access this powerful learning. And without you, it wouldn't be possible, right? So you're helping spread this. And you guys were first. I was so excited that when I reached out to sponsors for this, I did my first right of refusal, as I'm quite proud to say. I went out to the partners that I've worked with and wanted to work with on this initiative. And it was instant. You guys said, of course. Are you kidding? And back in the day when we were doing, other versions of the flat rate model and how GreatAmerica stepped right up to the plate and said, okay, we don't do this today, but let's figure it out. Let's figure out how we can actually, do this for our customers. So anyways, can't thank you enough.
Well, thanks for including us. This is great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'm going to do, just going to let you talk a little bit about what you do. So Kim and Ken, I'm going to hide you for a bit, and I'm going to give Tanya the podium just to tell us a little bit more about GreatAmerica for those that may not be familiar and what you do there.
Perfect. So GreatAmerica is a small ticket finance company. We are based in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The majority of our business is all U.S. based. We do just a hint of Canada, but it's really sort of a U.S. based operation. So I apologize to all of the other countries that are clearly represented in this challenge. At this point, I don't know that we're going to be able to help you, but at a minimum, we could maybe give you some guidance on some things that we've seen that worked well and didn't work well. We service several 100,000 contracts, several 100,000 invoices every month. Over half of the contracts that we do are bundled contracts. So we're really good at it. We've seen it a lot. And as West had mentioned, we were involved in sort of a variation of this many years ago, and we weren't doing this. And so, kind of with some help with some industry leaders, we came up with a plan. And I would say the way in which we are administering this flat rate billing is really flexible. And Kim's going to really talk about that from a contract perspective. But we really take a look at it as what, as a dealer, are you wanting to go to market with? What are you wanting to sell? And then making sure that we can support you. So I will sort of defer to Kim on talking about the different contracts, but small ticket financing is what we do. And to be honest, we're really known for being creative in solving and administering our dealers' programs. So whether it's a flat rate or whether it's something else, I would just say, raise your hand and we'll see if we can get it done. I'm also a very proud supporter of the MPSA. So for those of you that would be of interest to, West and I probably are two people that can give you some insight into the organization.
Yeah, I couldn't be any more proud to work with you through the MPSA and all of the stuff that everyone does to be able to support this industry, right? And, that's one of the things the MPSA they really stepped up, and actually we worked together to change even kind of some of the definitions of the things that we're going after to include things like flat rate, to include things like converged services, et cetera, right? So super proud to work with you in that organization as well. And hey, look, we got to
keep you in line, West. I mean,
yeah, I know. And you certainly do, and I appreciate it. Hey, look at that, Deborah Dennis. How are you, Deborah? Miss you, and looking forward to seeing you, I guess, in October. And it says, thanks, GreatAmerica and Kim. Yeah, thank you indeed. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually bring you back in, Kim. And I'm going to put up some slides that you sent to me because I asked for them, because it does a really good job of demonstrating just how flexible Great America is towards the flat rate program. And what I love about what you guys have done is that you've been flexible to meet the needs of the dealers, no matter which way that they're, pursuing it, right? In other words, there's no judging. It's like you do you, and we'll figure out how we can finance that, right? So just give me 1 second while I pull that up here.
Go ahead.
And who's going to speak to this right now? Is that going to be you, Kim?
Yep, I'll talk about this.
All right.
And really both you, West, and Tanya have kind of stole my thunder. It's really kind of hard when we asked us to do this and talk about it. We really don't have a single solution, right? I listened to Wes yesterday, the webinar yesterday, and Wes McCarter said, no one size fits all. And because no one size fits all, as you're working through the creation and the proposal, it's really hard to create a finance program that fits all. And I think about it a little bit in the early days of MPS. And if you ask a dealer what their MPS program is, it's going to be all over the board, right? Whether they finance any of it or part of it. And flat rates really the same concept, right? So what we really want you to be thinking about when you engage us is, what is your go-to-market? What's important to you? And what are you trying to accomplish? Because really what we want to do is be the supporting documents behind your program. And because we're independently owned and not a bank, we have a lot of flexibility in some of the things that we can do to help you do that. So, at the very minimum, the simplest way to do this is just that simple one-page agreement with no overage protections. And so that's another consideration you need to think about, is our document can help maybe shore up some of the concerns you may have with a all-in flat rate program. If you don't have, you may have some language in your service agreement, but if you want the contract to help provide some more legalities around that program, we have options for you. This was just a simple one-page lease agreement with no overage protection. So really, if you use Great America right now and you have just our one-page agreement, it's just going to show the number of months and what your payment is. And we don't really, there probably is some bundled service in there that we will need to know about. But we may or may not know that it's done on flat rate, because we're not collecting meters. We're not going to be charging any overages. So it can be done as simply as a one-page agreement. So that's
and I love that.
This is the simplest form it can be. It's so much simpler than a cost per. All the things that West is teaching you about making sure that you have your service contracts protected and you know what your costs are, absolutely go in part of it. But this is just a simple way to add financing as part of your program.
I love how simple it is, because I think part of the confusion in the marketplace when it comes to flat rate is they think that it has to be complicated, that there has to be, we're going to have this 10-page, document on the front page, detailing what it is. And it's not. It's very simple. I'm going to move on to the next one, which is, basically that first one didn't have any usage protection, but you also do have a way to offer usage protection for customers as well, right?
Yeah, and there's different ways to do this, right? In this case, what we've added is some language at the bottom, and in this case, we're doing it as a per user pricing, just as a sample document I owned. If you don't want to do per user, you don't have to, but the concept's the same, where we put some language, and I think if you go up a little bit, West, I think our names are maybe blocking it a bit, but underneath there, the payment and adjustment section below there at the bottom allows you to annually you can go in and make an adjustment. So we have dealers who want to do it on an annual true up, and so if you find that your estimates were wrong or the usage is different, maybe they got a big contract and they have more usage now, you have the ability to protect yourself and change your pricing. That may be in your service agreement, but this allows it, again, a little additional legal language in your document to protect you there.
Yeah, so I like the fact that it's revisited, right? That, you can adjust it upon the anniversary of that contract, because that is, one big question people have, to say, what if there is variability? And it's like, yeah, don't worry about that. You're protected. You can take care of that at anniversary of the contract for sure, right?
That's right. It's something that's really important that you bring out. You should be doing, some sort of periodic business review.
Oh, yes.
If not quarterly, definitely annually. And this is just one place where you can revisit that and make any adjustments that you need. And this is just in the document that protects that ability to do so.
Yeah, and we have talked about that through the challenges to make sure you use that. We're actually going to get a little bit deeper into QBRs and using that for upselling opportunities, and also to keep the customer on track so that if there are changes that are happening with their volumes for whatever reason, if they've acquired a new business unit or new people, etc., that you can take care of those things, and that GreatAmerica can help do that too. And
Right.
So the third one here, just want to look at the sample agreement with seat-based billing with monthly usage protection. So it's a nice visual here that you've got the beginning meter there, and you can talk about the rest.
Right. So this is really a little bit of a hybrid between a cost per seat-based flat rate. It's kind of the granddaddy of them all. If you want to throw it all the soup to nuts in here, the way you could do it. This allows you to go in and do a seat base and adjust by user, but you also have protection in the language that if they go above a certain number of clicks per month, then there can be an overage charge or a charge that's going to allow you to charge an additional fee. So this allows the greatest protection because you're protected both on a user basis and also on a click basis. So you kind of have dual protections there as needed. So again, we really don't care how you do it. It's just to show you that we have documents created to try to again, we want you to go in with the documents that match your go-to-market. And
Yes.
While we can't do maybe we can't do everything that you want to do, we can at least try to help guide you through what are the benefits or risks of doing what you're doing and try to find something that would work for both of our companies.
Yeah, and I got to say that you say you can't do everything, but you're already doing way more than any other finance provider that I've spoken to, right? So looks like
one other quick thing before we go into the invoicing. So another way I've seen folks do it, and it really doesn't require a document. If you go back to the very first document where it's just the single one page, what other dealers have done and what we have the ability to do is if you want to have some language in your service contract that allows you to, so many cartridges per month or per device, whatever you may be doing, if they go over it, you can charge it on the toner level. GreatAmerica has a really nice dealer portal that Tanya is actually creating, and even a better one. You can put those fees or those additional charges that maybe that don't fit into your, if they go above or beyond what you proposed, those could be added in and then shown as an extra line item on the invoice so that your invoice shows that. And so there's different ways that you can do to protect yourself as you step into these programs.
I work with dealers that actually what they've done is when they get to the end of the term, if there are some things that are over what, I love to call benchmarks, that they can have that discussion with the customer. And it's not necessarily based on a page. Oftentimes, it's just as you've said, they've elected to do it with just the extra cartridges, saying, hey, look, we'll just go by our published rates, whatever those are. That's what you get charged for those, additional, cartridges above and beyond, right? So very cool. Looks like we do have a quick question here from our friend Greg Walters. How are you, buddy?
Hi, Greg.
Former president of the MPSA and one of the experts in the industry. If you don't know Greg Walters, make sure you find him on LinkedIn for sure. And Greg's asking, how do you account for adjustments in the number of users over time?
So just like a standard cost per contract, we pretty much have a minimum number of users that's based on the total payment divided by the number of users, and that's going to be your minimum amount of users. So you really can't go below that. But if you want to add additional users or you have additional folks that are added, you just let us know that there's been an addition, and then we will add that to the invoice. And we've got an example of that. And Tanya's been instrumental in helping us set something up through eAutomate where you can do that, and we can do that through automation to get those numbers of users every billing cycle. So it makes it easy for us to make those adjustments as needed. So if you want to,
let's talk a little bit about,
yeah,
and we are running out of, starting to run out of time, but
sorry.
Page, I love this, is that we do have, 3 examples of different ways that you can actually invoice the customer, right? Which is amazing.
Yeah, and so you can see there, Greg, in invoice detail 2, if you have an additional user, we just throw that there. And that way you can see the additional, any additional owners or users. And one other quick thing is, this isn't just imaging. If you have voice over IP or IT or other professional services, that can be wrapped up into these, into the contract and the invoices as well. Even if you add services later or IT later, we can consolidate those invoices to encapsulate everything that you're showing to providing to a dealer or to the end user.
Which is so important. And we had this discussion a little bit when we were, sort of in the studio in the green room, that's what's really exciting about this, is this launch pad to be able to move into some of these other exciting services, right? And we actually do have a voice over IP sponsor, which will be speaking in a couple of days, and, all these other services. So it's wonderful that you've got this, way for people to actually physically be able to do that financing. Again, not around the world, but you've been very helpful when I've needed help helping customers that I work with in other places to help them at least get their head around some of the questions they should be asking their finance providers. So can't thank you guys enough. It's not just that you're a great finance company, you're just great people. So, and if you stick around, I'll probably say goodbye to you at the end, but if you can't, I know that you have busy lives, then thank you so much for, everything that you've done for the industry and for us today.
Yeah. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Good seeing you.
Good luck, everybody, implementing a program like this.
Yeah.
All right.
Give
Cheers,
us a call.
guys. Well, are those not 2 of the best people that you could ever know? I'm telling you.
They are amazing. I have had the privilege of meeting them at several of the seat-based billing road shows, because I had the chance to attend those, and that's where I really started to think about and see the potential that this offers. And like I said, GreatAmerica is such a valued partner.
It is. And I got another comment here from Greg Walters. Excellent. So for those at GreatAmerica, it looks like you did answer his question. Thank you very much for that. Hey, Ken, one of the things I'm going to start moving into now, when we kind of look at the contract fundamentals, and this is, one of the hardest parts initially. I will say that any engagement that I'm involved in, this is one of the hardest things, is to try and figure out which kind of contract you actually want to start with, right? Because as GreatAmerica showed in their invoicing details, there's lots of different ways to, that you can actually do it, right? So I'm just going to talk to a few of them here. Let's see if I can bring my screen back up.
Yeah, while you're working on that, the one thing I would say, and this is part of what happens when you work with us, is we sit down and we start figuring out where we want to go at the end as we start to build things out. Because what you don't want to do in this kind of a venture is to make your contract and your final destination an afterthought. You need to pick this. You need to begin with the end in mind.
You sure do. And where do you want to be in 3 years? So if you're going to be the kind of organization that wants to be in managed technology services or other things, and you're going through all this work with a flat rate program today, then boy, I'd want to make sure that I gear my contracts towards that kind of future growth, right?
Right.
So one of the first things I have up here is the benchmark volume. And this is always a fun one too, right? Because we have kind of the same fear, and I guess the industry will prove me right or wrong, but we have kind of the same fear today with volumes as we had with coverage when we were doing cost per page in the early days, right? And you remember we've talked about it, through the challenge that when people first started doing cost per page for printers, they would do it for black and white, but then they would sell the cartridges separately for color because they were so terrified of coverage being off, right? And of course, that never materialized. Perhaps it did once in a while, but never enough to be significant enough to negatively impact the programs. And so that's gone. Of course, cost per page now, for as long as we've known it, has been color and black and white. There have been different versions of that, just like there will be different versions of flat rate. Sometimes people did blended rates across the fleet. Sometimes they did it by work group category. Sometimes they did it by individual device, right? But at the end of the day, that fear of, coverage disappeared. And I think in the flat rate world, we're going to have the same thing with volumes, right? That, some of the organizations I worked with that did user tracking and some of the folks that we have in the MPSA that do it today have consistently seen the same thing, which is on average, user volumes are going down by 4 or 5%, sometimes as high as 10% a year, depending on the vertical, right? So I don't think that's going to be a fear, but at any rate, it's still a good thing to at least have that benchmark volume somewhere in that contract. And I put in brackets there that I prefer to have a little bit of a percentage buffer so that, instead of the customer having to worry, it's like, oh man, I was, over 1,000 pages and you guys, ding me in with another invoice. That's saying no, that perhaps in the contract language, you can actually put a bit of a buffer there to give them a percentage, worth of, grace, right? When I'm doing this in the contract, those benchmark volumes, you can put them where you want to, but I like customers not to think about the volume. So right from the time we're talking about the contract, that you can either put the benchmark volumes at the beginning. I prefer to see them in the terms and conditions so that they can actually be included in the fine print to say, that this flat rate price has been based on, these benchmarks, right? That they don't necessarily have to show up on the front page, which is the part that we're negotiating. The second piece there, one of the reasons that we still have to at least have some kind of measurement, and it doesn't matter if it's cost per page, or if it's cost per cartridge, right? But at least having that ability, if there is some dramatic discrepancy, to be able to, make amends. And our friends from France, if everyone remembers on day one, that's what they do. They have that 13th invoice to be able to true that up. And as Kim mentioned a bit earlier in today's call, that we should be doing those quarterly business reviews, or at least those periodic business reviews, to try and help the customer understand where they're at. So if we do have to make adjustments, that we can. Nothing says that we can't work with the customer 6 months in to say, look, the assessment was based on these numbers, but it's actually proving itself out to be a different scenario. So instead of waiting until that 13th invoice, should we amend the contract today, right? So there's many possibilities there, and that's why I put possibly. One other creative solution that actually a dealer friend of mine came up that I've been working with was to actually say, well, instead of a 13th invoice, we'll kind of do what they do in the auto world, right? So when you get a certain amount of kilometers or clicks, as we like to say in Canada, or miles, as you say in the US, with an agreement on a vehicle, that they're quite happy to dump that into the next vehicle that you get with them, right? Saying, hey, look, don't worry about it. We'll just put it forward into your future payments, right? So lots of opportunities there, but just being aware that you should have some kind of language, some kind of clauses in your contract that speak to that and that protect you. And you know what? At the end of the day, it's not just protection. It's also helping the customer to understand that they want to keep an eye on what they're doing, right? That if there are changes in their environment, that they probably want to work with their flat rate partner to figure out how that's going to impact things, or to figure out if there's better ways to do what they're thinking of doing, right? The third point there, Ken, is obviously the number of printing users, right? And this is a tricky one, because I know that oftentimes people will say, well, can I just use Active Directory? Or, at the end of the day, whatever the agreed upon method is for, tracking those users, those printing users, just to make sure that you have an agreement with the customer and what that is and how that can change. My personal preference, because I've based my sales career on assessments and using user data, is to try and make sure that whichever software application we're using for those rules, which we're going to talk about in a slide a little bit here, that gives us the ability to understand who's actually printing. And I shared this example already, so I won't go into it fully. But when I did the assessment at Toyota, it was really important to understand the number of printing users, because their Active Directory also contained all the people that were working on the factory floor, all the support staff, right? So it wasn't really a realistic representation if I just use that total number of how many pages per user, et cetera, right? So if they hired another 10 people that were printing and I based it on those numbers that were spread out over people that aren't printing, guess what's wrong with my numbers? They're not accurate. It doesn't allow me to upsell that customer for those new users accurately, right? So if you're working with a partner that does user-based rules and secure release printing, then they're a great partner to work with as well to get to make sure that you get those accurate printing user counts, right?
And one of the things I'm going to interject in
Please
this
do.
is that you want to use those clauses sparingly. In other words, if somebody's contracted for 10,000 and they run 100,000, you definitely want to do it. But if they're contracted for 10,000 and they run 11,000, the aggravation, first of all, the cost of generating the invoice is probably going to be, by the time you create it and get it paid and all those steps that go in admin wise, that's probably going to cost you more than just ignoring it.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to, you could always say, listen, you went a little bit over, but we'll build some goodwill. We're not charging you for it. And again, the key to this is try to keep it as simple as possible. Reduce your admin workload, reduce, again, the chasing of meters, all of those things.
Yeah. And I think what you say there is also important from a sales perspective, right? Because people that are selling against flat rate, it's the first thing they're going to do is they're going to jump on that 13th invoice clause, right? They're going to be like, oh, I thought it was flat rate. Why are they charging you a 13th invoice? What other little things are they going to nickel and dime you for, right? What other, things are they going to try and charge you for? Doesn't sound very flat to me, Ken. Sounds like they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes, right? And of course that's not the case. But the less we have to pull those triggers in a year, when a customer goes back to them and say, hey, by the way, just wanted to let you know, no 13th invoice. They worked with me. We got our volumes to where they should be. They've actually brought in some other solutions which have helped us more. We're actually doing a document management program with them now. We've digitized 25% of our documentation that before was being printed. So yeah, no, that hasn't happened, right? So to your point, use it sparingly, keep it there for protection, but do everything you can to wow that customer with the simplicity of the program, right?
Yep.
All right. I'm going to show another little thing here. So I do love me some rules. And anyone that knows me well knows that I don't really like a lot of rules in my personal life, but when it comes to running a program, I like it because the more I can automate, the less I forget. This is really important as we're building these things out, is to make sure that we let software do the heavy lifting, right? And just by way of a story, right? So I'm not a big fan of real work, but I am a fan of carpentry. And people say, well, how can you be a fan of carpentry and not real work? And it's like, well, because the tools allow me to make my vision happen, which whatever I'm trying to create out of that piece of wood, without a lot of physical labor. The tools are doing all the heavy lifting, right? And similarly, in our flat rate programs, why on earth would we want to do all this stuff manually, right? That sounds far too much like work. What we want to do is have the program to be able to run itself as effectively as possible once we have it set up in the front end with as little sort of intervention as possible. Now, I'm also a big believer, and we'll look at this, and we did this, remember yesterday, Ken, we sent out the homework for the 3 different levels, right? So if we go to a customer and say, hey, look, there's 3 options for you for a flat rate price. One is if I do nothing at all, just continue to print the way you're printing. The second is you agree to get rid of some email and web printing. So we can actually help you save some money there, be more efficient. And then we can also improve your security if you want to do some secure release, some authentication of the device, and get rid of some waste. That's the great news. Improve security, you're going to lose 20% of your volume. And then the addition of a toner saver if they want to go further, right? And you remember in those examples that we did yesterday, Ken, that it was like, for the level 1 pricing, it was like 0 effect in their pricing. They just get that predictable bill, right? The second level was, you see about 10% savings over your existing program. And the third option helped the customer see about 25% savings, right? Now, of course, with each of these things, there's more, skin on the table from the customer to make it happen, right? So we all know that if we're just going to convert them to a flat rate bill based on their current usage and nothing's changing, that's pretty easy. Like nothing changes. The second one actually isn't that difficult either. It just means that instead of having color email or web printing, it's going to be black and white. So no biggie. We're not telling them they have to print any less or do anything differently. But that third level, when we get into the secure release and the waste reduction and possibly the toner saver, now there is some more involvement from the customer. But if you want to get 25% savings, there is going to have to be some meeting in the middle. That, from my experience, though, that customers typically given 3 options will usually go with the middle one, right? And Ken, it's not just what's good for the customer; it's what's good for us as a dealer offering flat rate. That the more of these things that we can throw into the program, the harder it is for a competitor to step up, right? So
exactly.
But in the contract, you got to make sure you list these things. So any of the dealers I work with have actually created a little text box area which details the rules that are in place for the pricing level that they're based on, right? So, like I said, no one has to use my, cheesy silver, gold, and platinum levels, but, the idea is there that you reference that they're in the platinum level and that it involves these rule sets, which are a requirement of the program, right? To make sure at least everyone's on the same page. Yeah. So if you're doing it, just make sure that these things are actually, detailed in the contract. The other important part here is that I love being able to actually finance this as part of the overall agreement, right? Because, what's happened traditionally with these rules-based applications is the customers have just bought them themselves, right? That if they're an education institution or other thing where they're saying, hey, we need this because we got to put quotas for our students or whatever it is. But the power of having this included in the program is just that extra layer of stickiness. The competitor comes around to try and unpack it, right? Because it's pretty easy to understand if somebody knows a certain device and they know the volumes that contract's under, not too hard for them to come back with a competitive quote. If we've reduced a certain amount of volumes based on the assessment for color and email, and Secure Release got rid of a certain portion of waste, and that's included, that it's not an extra ticket item for cost. Now it's very hard. For a competitor, I'd say good luck. Do you know how much color the customer was printing before I built this price? I hope you do, because if you get the number wrong, you're going to be completely underwater, right? That we did this through an assessment. Securely, as we monitored once we put it in place through the trial, how much volume went away. Are you comfortable understanding what that number is? What do you think it is? 10%? 20%? Can you remember when we posed this question the other day? One of the dealers said that they've seen volumes go down as much as 30% in some of their accounts, right? So are you willing to take that risk when you're trying to compete with somebody? No, I would argue that you're not. So the more of this, it's not just good for the customers and for costs for both them and for us, but for that stickiness to be able to make it much harder to unpack. And the one thing I don't want to do after we get through all this work, and Ken, you mentioned it earlier, let's think towards the future. I don't want to start the race to the bottom today. People say, why don't I just offer the first level where it's just there's no rules in place? I'd be like, hey, that's fine if you want to do that, right? But now it's so easy for your competitor to come in and say, okay, I have no idea, but I'll give you 10% less, or I'll throw this in or throw whatever, right? That their risk at trying to push you out because of a price war is far less, right? So let's not start the race to the bottom all over again. Let's make sure that we're being a little bit smarter about how we build these packages out for our customers. Now, that being said, I guess, I always say no judging. I guess I just judged a little bit there, but, if you want to offer a flat rate program, which is, kind of a standard price per device, in the marketplace, then at least you're doing something flat rate. So whichever model you decide to go with.
Well, and to your point too, when we include the software as part of the finance package, that makes it just another layer of obscurity to our quote. So that the more that is in the quote, the less the competitors understand about the quote. I'll quote a friend of mine, Darrell Levin. He likes to say, where there's mystery, there's margin. And it's not that we're trying to hide anything from the customer, but what we are trying to do is make things as difficult as possible for the competition and maintain our margins as well as we can.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything nefarious about that at all. I'm telling you, when I watch Netflix and, a movie I recommend everyone watches, if anyone saw the Oscars on Sunday, Nomadland, wow, what a movie. Make sure you see it. It's got nothing to do with flat rate billing, but it is such a cool movie. And I guess where I'm going with that is that I never question Netflix about what their margins are. I'm not like, I wonder what Netflix paid, that production company to be able to show Nomadland. Like, what was that? And then how much are they paying for their bandwidth to be able to make sure that I get that, right? Like, we don't do that. It's all bundled in. The thing that we want is to be able to watch Nomadland, right? So for customers that are looking for managed print, the thing that they want is that reliable output. So, kind of shame on us for actually making it so easy for them to break all the component, parts apart, right? And that does get into my third point. Is it the third or the fourth? No, it's going to be the fourth. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So I'll hold my thunder on that for a couple of minutes. GreatAmerica could not have, showed this any simpler, right? That you want to make sure that the contract is simple and easy for the customer to understand. And I would argue the same thing with the terms and conditions, right? So a lot of the documentation that I go through, it's funny. I mean, I work with people in different countries, and they have different laws in their country that require certain terms and conditions to be added into the document. But what I'm speaking to is really just the piece that is towards our program, right? And to try and keep those things as simple as possible. And so the first thing is, yes, we do have to be aware that there are going to be some new definitions and that those should be included in the contract. So if on the front page of that agreement, I talk about a benchmark, or if I talk about a user, or I talk about a 13th invoice, that somewhere in the terms and conditions, you should have those new definitions, right? So in your contract today, you do have a definition for what cost per page means, kind of et cetera. So make sure that those are there. The second thing there is the ability to adjust the flat rate, right, based on those benchmarks. And again, as we talked about, you want to try and pull those levers as seldom as possible. But if you have to, that at least you and the customer understand that for whatever reason, that this does go in a different direction, that it is listed in the contract. And again, those do not have to be that complicated, right? So I've simply added, working with some of my customers, just an additional item at the end, which talks to this idea of what the benchmark represents, and that it will go towards basically their published rates for additional cartridges above and beyond that, right? And that's important because you want to make sure that it's easy and clear for the customer to understand if there are changes that happen to come up, right? The third one here, Ken, is something that's called fair play in the business. And I love this because I actually learned this one down in Australia many, many years ago. And this whole idea of actually listing a few fair play clauses certainly doesn't hurt. And I'll kind of talk through this one, for a second. So I want to actually, if people could in the comments, maybe put in one of their fears as to what could go wrong with a flat rate program. How could a customer get you? Like what kind of thing could happen, where a customer could get you, especially if you're going with the flat rate program that has no protections for overages, right? So what could a customer, do that could get you? And while I'm waiting for someone to share a comment, I'll share one that I know really well. Oh, looks like we got a comment. Hold on.
That was me.
Oh, that's you. Doesn't count, Ken. You're one of the hosts.
I just posted a question.
Yeah. Most customers, I actually shouldn't say most customers, but I'll say a lot of customers actually outsource some of their print needs. So if they're producing something that's either for a mailer or other things, they may outsource that print. And imagine, if you will, under a flat rate program, that I could actually pull that in-house. Wouldn't that save me some money, Ken? That'd be great, eh? Like, I got this flat rate contract now. I've got, about 20,000 pages a month that I'm outsourcing. Why don't I bring those in? Because it's not going to cost me anymore. Well, no. And that's an example that I would list in the contract as a fair play clause, right? Only two things: page volume and coverage. Yeah, those are absolutely critical. Yeah, the fundamentals to make sure that those are in there. And the second thing that I would worry about with a customer, and again, I wouldn't worry about it too much as long as I have that fair play clause there, is what if you're not the only supplier in that environment, right? So how many times are we actually servicing a customer 100%? Not always. Sometimes there's a competitor that's in there that actually has some of the other devices. And what if some other devices are actually under a cost per page contract? Wouldn't it be neat if those volumes started floating over to the flat rate device? Well, that's probably not fair play, right? So just to mention those things. Now, again, if you've built protections in your contract already for the overages and for the coverage, that doesn't matter because you've already built that language in. But if you do have a contract where you're not charging for those overages, then you've got to make sure that those fair play clauses are there, right? Good fences make good neighbors. What do they say? Locks on a car or door keep honest people honest, right? It just makes people aware of, yes, these things might even happen accidentally, but just to be aware that if they do, it could alter the flat rate price that we're doing. So I would certainly say if you can include some fair play just for examples in that contract. All right, Ken, we were talking about this a little earlier, and I said I'll hold my thunder for kind of waiting until we actually get to this point. And let's see if I got here. All right. that when I'm presenting I guess my favorite way to present that contract is value based. And we've heard this so many times, people saying, well, a flat rate program should be based on, per device basis, right? Or no, hold a minute. I think that it should be users. You should base it on, users. And the truth is, I think it should be based on a value, which is to say between the number of users, the number of devices that are supported, the pages that are basically the benchmarks in that contract. And you saw it with Great America's example, right? That they had that one charge, which is listed both on that contract and that invoice. That's it, that one charge for all those things. And that's a value-based bill. That's the piece of cake. That's what we were talking about with Netflix, me not being concerned about, how much they have to pay for Nomadland before they let me see it, right? That I'm buying the piece of cake. As long as I get my piece of cake, I'm not going to question you on how much you're paying for the sugar, how much that strawberry cost you on top or anything else, right? It is a value-based bill. This whole idea of keeping it as detail-free as possible, I think is so critical, both from an ongoing management of the contract, but also in the quoting process to make it as simple as possible for the customers to say yes. The second thing there is, and I know Great America has this too, because I've seen them in their agreements, that you can have schedules, that you'll have additional documents which are attached to that main contract, which can break out the detail for some of that other stuff. So certainly now you can have a schedule which has all of the equipment that's being supported, how much of it is actually being financed, how much of it is customer owned, et cetera, right? So you can have those schedules. They don't have to be up front and center. The third part we talked about already, the T's and C's, just to make sure that we can list those benchmark, those invoices, et cetera, within that contract. So really focus on that, a value-based. Now, where it also comes in handy, Ken, is we start to look towards the future, right? In the coming days, we're going to be talking with people with telephony and voice over IP and security and managed desktop and all these other things, which we want to be able to put into that contract, right? And, the way that it exists today, the partners that I've worked with that are selling both managed print today and then selling managed technology services have two very different contracts. And so when you go to the customer, you're the same company, you got two separate sets of sales reps. And I'm not saying that goes away. You still have to have certain sets of expertise perhaps. But can you imagine getting two different, entirely different contracts, like you're getting it from two different companies, right? So to build this value-based contract out is going to allow you, and again, I don't want to talk too much about it because it's coming up in a couple of days, to be able to start putting those other services into that contract, right? That with flat rate, we're not just building a new way to offer managed print. We're offering a way to do that, as well as to start to condition your business for the future of what it's going to look like, right? I'm the president of the Managed Print Services Association, but I look forward to the day when it's seen and respected as a managed technology, just like everything else, right? That it's managed print should not be separate from managed technology, that these are all aspects of a customer's workflow, how they do business, right? There's no standalone technology in the office that does something entirely different for the customer. It's all driving towards helping them to sell more, for them to run a more efficient business, for them to have better workflows, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to sneak a little bit of a peek about what's coming in the rest of the week. So in theory, and we'll talk about how, and we'll help the dealers we work with to get there. You could have a situation where your customer never had to talk to another sales rep again. You never had to worry about losing your customer. And, you had basically customers for life. That should be the ultimate goal, and that is within reach. And we're going to help you get there if that's what you want.
Exactly. Yeah, I got one final pointer. You know that I like to do 5 points a day, Ken. Look at number 5. And I see that Kim and Tanya look like they're still here. So I'm going to drag them in. There we go. Hey, how are you guys?
I like that one.
I will say for those that are, in the North American marketplace, work with these guys. They have stepped up to the plate, and believe me, when I first went into the marketplace with this whole concept of flat rate, I knew how important the finance part was. And it's not to say that I didn't reach out and ask other people, for help. The ones that came right up to the plate, yeah, I know. The ones that stepped right up to the plate and said, let's figure this out, Great America. You guys are phenomenal. So if you're looking to do a flat rate program and you're looking to finance, which you should be, to be able to deliver some extra value both for you and your customer, then talk to these guys, right? So can't thank you enough for sponsoring today as well.
No, thanks for
Absolutely.
including us. We're excited about new programs for the dealers and making from a plan to that invoice. Like you said, that's the end of the picture at the end. So we were happy to get you there.
Yeah, I am so excited. The first time that a dealer actually does one of these deals, like when they actually get that paperwork coming through and it becomes real, those are exciting days. So looking forward to working with a lot of people that are on the challenge to be able to deliver on that. So thanks again, guys, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
All right. Thanks.
Have a good day, guys. Take
Yeah, they certainly are amazing. And one of the other things I'll throw out there is you should register for this Flat Rate Challenge. If you're watching it on YouTube, if you're watching it on LinkedIn and you're not registered, and we mentioned it at the beginning, it's free right now thanks to our sponsors like GreatAmerica and others for you to be able to have access to this great content. Registered members get access to all 10 days of the challenge in one easy place. The other thing that you get is the opportunity to win $250 on the last day of the challenge. So, Ken, I want to thank you for being on yet another challenge day with me. And I'll say as well, if anyone wants to talk to Ken and I, we are reserving time. We've got buckets of time. You can actually book a time with us on our calendars and make sure. Let's see if that's linked there. There it is. It's in the comment section. And we'd love to talk to you. We've got 2 conversations we're going to have with dealers tomorrow. And maybe the next one will be with you. So whatever you do in your flat rate program, just make sure you get started. Thanks for tuning in. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow for day 8, believe it or not. And tomorrow, actually, Ken, we're going to be talking about upselling in these PBRs. We're guiding the ship towards that, right? This evolution of the business. So really looking forward to that. For everybody out there in video land, thank you very much for tuning in. And we will talk to you tomorrow.
Tomorrow.